There's a moment you've lived through more times than you probably realize. A moment when you're sitting at your desk or on your couch or at your kitchen table, surrounded by the beginnings of something new. The fresh journal you were excited to fill, the watercolor set you bought last week, the half-knit scarf, the guitar you swore you'd learn. And suddenly, quietly, without warning, something in you shifts. You look at the materials you were thrilled about just days ago, maybe even hours ago, and the excitement you felt evaporates. Not dramatically, not painfully, just softly, like a candle being blown out by the gentlest breeze. You tell yourself you'll return to it later. You stack it neatly. You put it on a shelf. And you whisper, "Not today." Then almost instantly, another curiosity appears. A new hobby, a new project, a new idea that feels brighter, fresher, more electrifying. And before you know it, you're Googling something new, shopping for something new, imagining the possibility of something new. Does this sound familiar? There's something quietly meaningful about people who get bored easily. They're not inconsistent, they're not flaky, they're not unfocused, they're just wired differently. And that wiring, that constant craving for stimulation, creativity, depth, novelty, or excitement, has a psychological story behind it, one deeper than most people ever realize. People who get bored easily don't lose interest because they're incapable. They lose interest because their mind is built to explore. They're the wanderers of the internal world, the curious souls who never settle in one place for too long. Their boredom isn't a flaw, it's a compass. And today we're exploring the gentle, intricate psychology behind that compass. Not to judge, not to fix, not to criticize, but to understand, quietly, compassionately, honestly. Most people misunderstand boredom. They see it as lack of interest. But in people who get bored easily, boredom is actually urgency. The urgent need for something that sparks their mind, something that lights up their emotions, something that challenges their imagination. Their boredom is not emptiness. It's hunger. It's the mind whispering, "This isn't enough. I need more. I need depth. I need meaning. I need something that lights me up." And that hunger has roots. Neurological roots, emotional roots, psychological roots. Some people are born novelty seekers. Their brain responds intensely to beginnings. The first day of a new hobby feels like magic. The second feels good. The third feels fine. The fourth feels flat. Not because they don't care, but because their brain is wired to chase that first spark. It's not weakness, it's orientation. They're explorers, not settlers. Their mind thrives on what's new, what's fresh, what's different. They don't stay in one lane because one lane feels too small. Their curiosity stretches wider than routine can contain. Then there are the fast-thinking minds. The people whose thoughts move faster than the world around them. They make connections instantly. They process information quickly. They imagine possibilities automatically. And routine feels like a cage. When your mind sprints, the world moves too slowly to keep up. That's why they lose interest quickly. They're not impatient, they're understimulated. Their mind races ahead of the task, the hobby, the conversation. Boredom is not a sign of distraction. It's a sign of mismatch. Their brain is a Ferrari stuck behind a tractor. And then you have the creatives, the people whose inner world is a multiverse. They don't have one passion. They have 20. They don't want one life. They want 1,000 tiny versions of themselves, exploring different corners of existence. They paint one week, bake the next, write music the next, and rearrange their bedroom the week after that. Their hobbies are not phases, they're expansions, expressions, explorations. To them, beginnings are intoxicating. Potential is irresistible. And once the novelty fades, once the spark quiets down, they drift toward the next idea calling their name. Not because they're lost, but because they're overflowing. Some minds don't move in straight lines. That doesn't make them scattered, it makes them stars. There are also people whose emotional world requires richness. They don't just want stimulation. They want resonance. They want to feel deeply, not mildly. To them, monotony isn't just boring. It's emotionally dull. Predictability doesn't feel safe. It feels suffocating. They don't drift from hobby to hobby because they're avoidant. They drift because emotional flatness feels like silence. They need intensity. Not in a reckless way, but in a soulful way. Something has to move them, touch them, challenge them. If it doesn't, they move on. Their boredom isn't attention related, it's meaning related. And then there are the sensitive nervous systems, the people whose minds interpret stillness as discomfort. Not because they're restless, but because routine feels like shutting down. Their body is regulated by movement, change, novelty. Newness isn't a distraction for them, it's therapy. A shift in hobby is a shift in emotion. A new project is a new breath of air. A new interest is a form of grounding. They're not running away from life, they're regulating themselves through exploration. Hidden beneath all of this, there's a group people rarely talk about. The emotionally exhausted. People who have been burned out for so long that everything feels dull. People who have poured themselves into survival, responsibility, or caretaking until they've emptied out the spark inside. For them, boredom isn't boredom, it's depletion. It's emotional fatigue wearing a different mask. When you're tired on the inside, new things only hold your energy briefly, before it slips away again. Not because the hobby wasn't good, but because the battery was already drained. Some people get bored easily because they're not stimulated. Others get bored easily because they're not rested. And then there's a quiet pattern you see in people like this, an unspoken truth. They love beginnings, but they fear the plateau. Beginnings feel free. No expectations, no pressure, no flawed attempts, just curiosity and possibility. But then comes the middle phase, the point where improvement slows down, where discipline replaces novelty, where practice replaces magic. And suddenly the hobby doesn't feel fun anymore, and boredom becomes an exit. Not consciously, not dramatically, just quietly. Because underneath the boredom there's often a whisper of fear. What if I'm not good at this? What if this gets harder? What if I fail? What if I'm not as talented as I hoped? What if this requires more from me than I can give? And boredom steps in to protect them. It says, I'm done. But it really means I'm afraid. This isn't avoidance, it's self-preservation. There is also a childhood layer to this pattern, a layer many people don't realise shapes them. People who get bored easily often grew up in environments where curiosity wasn't nurtured. Maybe they were told to focus all the time. Maybe they weren't allowed to explore. Maybe their interests were mocked. Maybe they weren't supported. Maybe their creativity was stifled. So now as adults, they chase every spark with the hunger of someone reclaiming lost freedom. Every new hobby is a rebellion against a childhood that denied exploration. Every new interest is a reclaiming of autonomy. Every shift in attention is self-restoration. Their boredom isn't irresponsibility, it's healing, it's liberation. And yet people who get bored easily are often misunderstood. They're told, you never stick to anything. You need to be more consistent. You always quit. You're all over the place. You need to pick one thing. But if you watch closely, you'll see something beautiful. They don't quit because they didn't care. They quit because they cared intensely, and the spark faded. Their love is real, their excitement is real, their passion is real, just not permanent. Their mind isn't built for one story, it's built for many. And the world misunderstands that, but that doesn't make them flawed, that makes them expansive. Still, there is a quiet struggle hidden beneath this pattern, a struggle most people never see. People who get bored easily often carry guilt, shame, self-doubt, frustration, embarrassment. They hide the half-finished projects, they apologise for changing interests. They feel bad for drifting away, they wonder why they can't be more disciplined. They worry that they look scattered or inconsistent. They tell themselves they need to stick to things, even though their mind is happiest when it's exploring. They judge themselves for being what they were never meant to be. But nothing is wrong with them. Their curiosity is not a flaw. Their shifting interests are not a problem. Their novelty-seeking is not a weakness. It's who they are, and it's beautiful. Something remarkable happens when someone like this finally understands themselves. They stop forcing consistency. They stop trying to fit into boxes that suffocate them. They stop apologizing for their curiosity. They stop calling themselves quitters. They realize they're not inconsistent. They're multi-passionate. They're not flaky. They're explorers. They're not scattered. They're expansive. They stop expecting themselves to finish every hobby, and start honoring the ones that truly light them up. They learn to recognize the difference between distraction and intuition. They start choosing what aligns with their soul instead of what aligns with expectations. And slowly, gently, beautifully, they become consistent in the only way that matters, consistent in listening to themselves. People who get bored easily are often the innovators of the world, the creators, the dreamers, the idea makers, the explorers, the inventors, the ones who bring new colours wherever they go. They don't settle. They evolve. They don't walk a straight path. They walk many, in many directions, with many versions of themselves leading the way. Their boredom isn't emptiness. It's intuition. It's their mind saying, this chapter is done. I'm ready for something new. There's more for me out there. And instead of ignoring that whisper, they follow it. Not because they're lost, but because they're brave enough to chase the spark. So if you get bored easily, if your passions rotate, if your interests shift, if your excitement burns bright and fades fast, if you start more than you finish, if you move from idea to idea like stepping stones across a river, nothing is wrong with you. You are not inconsistent. You are not unfocused. You are not broken. You are wired for exploration. You are built for curiosity. You are designed for possibility. You are meant for many chapters, not one. And your boredom is not a flaw. It's a compass, pointing you toward the next version of yourself, the next idea, the next adventure, the next spark, the next life you're meant to taste. People like you don't get bored because you're empty. You get bored because you're overflowing. Overflowing with potential, overflowing with creativity, overflowing with lives you haven't lived yet, overflowing with directions you haven't explored. Your mind is not asking you to settle, it's asking you to expand. And that expansion, that quiet desire to explore everything life has to offer, is not something to fix, it's something to honor. Thank you for spending this time here with me. If this video resonated with you, please consider liking, sharing this video, and subscribing for more psychological insights.